Hello, my lovely legal enthusiast humans. I am FCA. We're going to do some Karen Read trial updates. I'm going to do a quick recap and then get into the updates that have happened. This case is crazy. Just for transparency, want to throw it out there that this is not my profession. Legalese is not my bringing in the money thing. I am an aficionado. Everything that I am giving you can be looked up online. I will link to everything below, timestamps when necessary. I will put them into everything below. Everything is publicly accessible that I am sharing with you. I am just trying to do some layman updates because I'm fascinated and just want to share my fascination with people who might also be fascinated. So Karen Read is in for trial 2 starting in April, with jury selection starting on April 1st, which is ironic in and of itself. We'll touch on it in a bit. Karen Read is the defendant who has been accused of accidentally offing her ex-cop boyfriend John O'Keefe by backing into him with her car and leaving him to die in fellow cop Albert's yard in the snow in January in Canton, Massachusetts, which is close to Boston, Massachusetts, which means it's cold in January. There was a lot of reports of snowfall by every witness that the Commonwealth, which is the prosecution name in Massachusetts, asked. The first trial was a madhouse. We had lead investigators calling the defendant to fellow cops and civilians the "see you next Tuesday" word, referring to some of her medical conditions, calling her a whack job, and less than 24 hours into the case, telling other people that they were going to pin it on the girl and nothing was going to happen to the person whose yard John O'Keefe was found in because he was a cop too. Those are all quotations. I will link to those things below for you to see. The case was just some not being treated as a homicide, it seems, and blood evidence being collected in red Solo cups, and further collection happening over the next couple months, sure, with missing and inverted video evidence in the police garage where Karen Read's car was kept, for investigating and such. And it doesn't get any less crazy as we go into trial 2. Trial 2 brings us a new prosecutor, Special Prosecutor Brennan. He so far has been a little more snarky than original prosecutor Lally. He has been also a little more methodical and easier to understand, and he has been uncovering the stuff, which might mean a Brady violation. But that trial hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen, I believe, next week is what we're looking at. So we have trial 2 coming up due to a hung jury. If you watched me during that, I have a whole bunch of shorts about it. I was ticked. And we're going to talk about that. I mentioned earlier that April 1st being the jury selection is ironic and funny because it might not happen due to some Brady violations. Brady violations is when the prosecution specifically withholds or hides or distorts evidence in order to keep it out of the case, not turn it over to the defense. If you do not turn all evidence over to the other team, you can get the case dismissed with prejudice, similar to Alec Baldwin in the Rust trial. It is because the prosecutors were found to have been hiding and intentionally withholding evidence from the defense that was key evidence, very important, related to the case. And the Sally Port videos, as I had mentioned, were there too. The Sally Port kept the car, and the evidence from the first trial, that video evidence, was inverted, and there were timestamps missing. So the defense in the new trial motions, they got a continuance granted this time. Both sides asked for one in the first trial. It was denied by Judge Canone. She allowed it this time. This trial was supposed to happen in January. It's now supposed to happen in April. But Brennan has been uncovering stuff, and he was like, what is this? There were just someone had clips from the Sally Port that were missing, stored on a random file drive. Who did that? We don't know yet. And that's where the trial for Brady violation is going to come up soon. And it involves a very key witness, Brian Higgins. Let me give you that recap so that all makes sense in case you weren't around for it. You see, in the original case, Brian Higgins was another fellow cop law enforcement person who had the hots for Karen Reed. They had some flirty texts going back and forth, and then his phone got destroyed, like broken, FBI file wiped, and thrown into a military garbage where it was not allowed to be retrieved. That's not suspicious. And he has phone records still, and the phone records saw that shortly after the estimated time of death of John O'Keefe, Brian Higgins had some phone calls to Mr. Albert. But he goes, no, that was an unanswered call. That was a butt dial. If you were not here for the original trial, the number of suspicious butt dials was enormous. I mean, like, the size of Kim K's booty, enormous amount of butt dials. And that's supposedly what happened with him. The reason why this matters is in the Sallyport video that Brennan had discovered had not been turned over to the defense. At the time when one of his calls to Alberts was made, Higgins is seen at the Sallyport on the phone talking to someone at that time, which means that wasn't a butt dial, and someone answered, and he had a conversation with them. Short as it might have been, it still happened, which means what he said on the stand was not true. Now, before people go getting crazy, getting hit with, needed water, with perjury, that's very hard to prove. What's just going to happen is make him look uncredible, less credible, uncredible. Make him look not credible to the jury, to the new jury. And if that evidence had been there, it could have been used to impeach him. Impeach means shown to be lying, make them look less credible. Not every time does a person lie on the stand do they get perjury charges. That's actually really rare, which is something I learned in the last year. So with this came a motion for the defense to have their expert paid for, or the expenditures of their expert paid for by the prosecution, aka the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And they said because they wanted, they got this thing and they were like, you know what, we want the whole video. We're tired of getting pieces, bits, and clips, especially distorted clips from the prosecution. We want the original whole video from the Sallyport with Karen Reed's car in it, and we want our expert to be able to analyze the metadata in the video from it. So they sent their expert there. They flew an expert to Canton PD to get it. And then it wasn't there. So they said, the prosecution told us that we could go and pick it up there. We get there and it's not there. We were led on a wild goose chase, Your Honor. However, Prosecutor Lally said, that's not the conversation we had. I told them, you can try, but it's unlikely that it's there, because Brennan himself, who has been uncovering and looking for things, who brought forth the Brian Higgins Sallyport clip to the defense, said, we don't think that exists anymore. There was an overwrite system that automatically overwrites after X number of days, and there's a high probability that it has been overwritten and that the original video cannot be obtained anymore. And in fact, defense attorney Alan Jackson concurred with that, and they took their chances and sent their expert anyway. So that motion was denied by Judge Canone because she was like, listen, you took your shot and you missed. That's not on the prosecution. They didn't say, oh yeah, it's there, go get it. They were like, you can try it, but it's probably not going to work, which is very, very different. Hence why there is going to be a Brady trial, because someone from the Commonwealth has multiple other selected video clips from the Sallyport, including the one with Brian Higgins and several others. Well, who was it? And why did they keep it from us? Because Special Prosecutor Brennan was able to find it. So how come Lally didn't find it last trial? How come this stuff wasn't turned over 2 years ago? The other thing that has been happening in the last fortnight is normally in trials, The prosecution has the burden of proof. They have to prove their case. They need to prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that what the person who they said did the thing, did the thing. The defense doesn't have to prove anything. I mean, if you have an alibi, that's useful, but they don't have to prove anything. They just have to poke enough holes in the presented case of the prosecution to maintain reasonable doubt and help their client out. However, in this particular case, it's not the defense who's trying to suppress evidence and keep experts out. It's the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has been on a spree of saying, we don't want the dog bite expert. We don't want the defense's cell phone extraction expert. We don't want the reconstructionist that the defense hired. We want all of those experts kept out. So there have been Daubert hearings. One particular Daubert hearing that's already occurred. The other one has not yet occurred. And that is the dog bite wound expert. Now, why is there a dog bite wound expert here? Well, there are wounds on the victim on one of his arms, and it has been expertly likened to being dog bite wounds. And the reconstructionists say that the way the Commonwealth has been trying to present the case, that Karen Reed backed her car into John O'Keefe hard enough to send him from the edge of the road into the middle of the Alberts yard where he was found the next morning, but without any other injuries to his body, just blunt force trauma to his head and somehow some wounds similar looking to the pattern of dog bite wounds on his inner forearm. The expert had said that it was very similar to if you go like this to block something from hitting your head, that a dog went for the arm. This matters because the Alberts, the house with the yard where John O'Keefe's body was found, had a German Shepherd named Chloe. I say had intentionally because shortly, just a couple months after this whole thing happened, they rehomed Chloe to Vermont. Well, you don't say. And they rehomed a bunch of their sput dialing cell phones. And they were like, oh, he never came in the house. Yeah, we were all hanging out together and everybody else came to the house to hang out after. But not him. We never saw him come in the house. And the reconstructionists were like, we have not been able to successfully, in the first trial, recreate the scene without the rest of the body getting more damage. There's no contusions, there's no bruising, there's only blunt force trauma to the back of the head. So in order for John O'Keefe to have been standing where his head would get hit, the back of his head would get hit, somehow scratch his arm in a weird way, and get thrown into the middle of the yard, they're like, we just don't have that. And the prosecution was like, we don't need them. We're going to hire our own people who actually know what they're doing. These people that they hired, these IRCA people, or IRSA people, it's IRCA, they don't know what they're talking about. So they want to have another hearing to determine if those experts are actually experts in what they say they're experting in. They were unsuccessful with keeping out the dog bite wound expert. They were unsuccessful with the cell phone extraction expert because there's a big controversy between a very controversial witness as well, Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe is Nicole Alberts, Mr. Alberts' wife. Her sister Jen has been fun. She has been very pushy. She is very much on attack/defense mode when she's on the stand. And she kept doing things like, well, is that the real report? Or was that just an expert from the report that you fancily picked out? And all kinds of stuff. She was crazy wild. I will link to her thing below with timestamps. I have a whole thing that thought she was just off the handle. I personally did not care for her, for full transparency, but she was a lot. She has a search on her phone that says, how's long to die in cold? And so the controversy there is, did she make it around 2 something in the morning? Close to when he succumbed to his injuries? Or did she make it, as she claimed, when they found him in the morning and Karen Reed was freaking out, and Jen McCabe said that she was doing some research on her phone, because he was there. She was trying to see if there was a way he could be okay, etc. Well, the defense cell phone expert said, oh no, this was made at 2:30 in the morning. The Commonwealth was like, no, she just left all of her tabs open, and if you leave all the tabs open, whatever time the tab was originally opened, everything else after that will say that it's this time. And so we got to go through all of that. New prosecutor Lally has also he has a load of new experts that he's bringing in. He has an entirely new witness list. Well, not an entirely new. The order of importance and people on that list, very different from the first one. This is a whole new trial. It's not just, okay, we got to try again. Let's switch a few things up. This is like starting fresh. He has a whole bunch of new files he wants to put in. He has a whole bunch of expert reports that he wants in. And they have, between now, February and April, that time span for lawyers is not long. We all know how fast time goes in our day-to-day lives. For them to figure out if this trial happens, what about the defense not turning stuff over too? As we said, there was some phone records that had not been turned over. We don't do that. Come on, guys. We're all professionals here. Well, you're all professionals over there that act like it. I'm allowed to act like an amateur because I am. But yeah, I am just so fascinated by this trial because we have, and the lead investigator, for those of you who aren't keeping up, Trooper Proctor, has been forced out of his job. He was fired from the investigations of this case and of his text messages. As I mentioned, his very unpopular text messages. And so there's a whole bunch of other things that are going to come up. There's an additional defense attorney who is on Karen Reed's side. The prosecutor wanted to go through her parents' cell phone data that had been completely thrown out because they did not meet their burdens to allow that evidence in. And we are just going to have to see where this goes. Did Karen Reed, just in kind of an odd way, perhaps, nothing's impossible, I suppose, really did hit her ex-boyfriend with a car and then left him? Because the claim is that she was intoxicated at the time, and that's why she's getting negligent homicide and not first degree, because they were like, we don't think she intended it, we're just saying she did it. And then left him in an angry fit after having a jealous-induced fight with him? Or are the Alberts doing a massive cover-up because the cops are going to protect the cops? We get to find out. Is there a cover-up? Is Karen Reed just kind of crazy and, maybe you should watch the alcohol? We are going to find all of that out maybe in April. Or maybe the case will be dismissed and we will never know. So, that's what we have on there. I hope that you have a good rest of your day, good rest of your weekend. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, my lovely humans.